Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. Plenty of action in the Challenger side last night with another organisation departing we'll get into, but the spiciest thing for sure was the biggest matchup we have seen so far in this Challenger side, the Ascension playoffs between M80 and the Union. So much crazy reaction to this one, drama, spicy stuff all over the place we'll get into, and setting up the grand finals that really we expected all along. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Wanted to address what we discussed with ShahZaM and the G2 roster situation yesterday. Can be quite difficult. You see these clips sometimes that don't necessarily have all the context that you would like, and ShahZaM kind of addressed this actually in the comments of yesterday's video, discussing how what we talked about with the blaming Riot side, and I appreciate the title didn't fully do this justice, but I thought it was understandable from what I was talking about that like ShahZaM wasn't blaming Riot for the team getting released per se, was talking really about the way that Riot structured the ecosystem such that teams are more likely to do this. You know, Riot aren't the reason that G2 made their call, absolutely, but it's contributed to the circumstance in challenges. So just wanted to share ShahZaM's kind of response here, saying that it's the same sentiment that many players have shared, and absolutely agree that ShahZaM is only one of many saying a similar thing in terms of the way the challenges situation is structured and the tournament structure, especially with all this time off. And I guess the point is that while Riot have contributed to the circumstances they're in, fundamentally ShahZaM admits that it was on G2 and them as a team not performing as well as they could have done, because if they were better, then they'd have been in the position that M80 and the Guard are in. So I think that was a point that it was at times missed in yesterday's video, so I definitely wanted to address that. But also ShahZaM's point on the tournament structure in the circuits definitely remains true, because last night we got TSM also parting ways with their VALORANT roster. So ShahZaM's going to stay on as a content guy for G2 for now, might come back next season when G2 would expect them to re-enter into challenges, and you'd think TSM will do the same. They have said they have plans to do so, but as expected they're releasing their team. So, you know, I mean, look, we've talked about this for quite some time now, the way that it's structured. There's no reason for these organisations to stay around in this period, so TSM are going to get rid of Kanpeki, Seven, you know, Nature, GMD, and Corey, of course, and I do wonder whether any of these guys, I mean, it's doubtful, right? I mean, you look at some of the other, like G2, for example, you look at even ShahZaM, but certainly a dapr or an Oxy or something, you know, a tier 1 team might look at those guys if they're making big changes. I don't necessarily see that tier with these TSM guys that are now going to be free, but it's definitely unfortunate for them. Now, they did affirm their commitment to making the return once the Ascension situation actually resumes in several months' time, so they will be reforming an entirely different roster, but for now they're going to be stepping away from the scene, and some of these orgs won't come back. It's just the way it is. In a few months' time, the financial situation might be somewhat different. They might not be able to afford a return to VALORANT, so yeah, not ideal. Seven was probably, you know, Corey was great, and there's other good players, but he's been a name that's been around for some time as a quite possible contender here, right? 100 Thieves 7 right back in the day, which was an entertaining time period, but yeah, so Seven looking for his next opportunity, as with many others right now, unfortunately, in the Challengers ecosystem. That will be the case for many players that are going to lose out on this Ascension tournament, and one of the teams that's going home is the Union. Now, this was all sorts of drama the last few days. You guys might remember when M80 played the Union the very first match of the tournament, and we talked about it being like, well, M80 haven't really turned up yet. It's early days, just to qualify a game. It doesn't mean that much, but M80 celebrated this like they'd won the entire tournament. Okay, not quite to that level, but you know, they were talking a lot of trash after the tourney. The players were, or after this matchup, right? A seeding game early on in the tournament. So, you know, they were talking trash on stage. The social media guys were coming out with stuff, and you know, stuff like this, right? And the match ends, and they do all this, you know, welcome to Brazil and all this across the stage after getting the victory. Now, a few days later, we find ourselves in a rather different position, and I mean, yeah, so this was the immediate reaction from the Union guys at the time. Early days, not a massively big deal, even their social media. Imagine training against like proper franchises and still losing. So, you know, onliners, feel the pressure, bro, like, so all this. So, you know, they were doing a lot of this trash talk after those early days, and M80, they saved up, you know, they saved up to come different. And even at the time, one of the Union guys, you know, GG is 2-0 versus mid 80, right? So this was the reaction a few days ago when they played for the first time. And last night, M80, I'm sure, wanted revenge. And this is on a Union team that isn't particularly well liked anyway, because they've got Pank and NTK on their players with highly questionable reputation. So the first series that M80 played was against 9Z. They got the job done 2-0. It was relatively impressive. Pearl was good, 13-4, and then 13-10 on Haven. The Haven was a bit suspect for sure for M80, but they eventually got over the line here. EU with a fantastic map to deliver the goods. They took down TenZ, and M80, as expected, I think, finding their groove at some point in the tournament. I think they started off a bit slow, but eventually all the pieces started to click, and then we got into the big series, right? So the Guard had taken down the Union the other day. Many were hoping that M80 could do the same, eliminate them from the tournament, but also the question was, would this favour the Guard or the Union? Because the Union guys, they come in with no warm-up, but yet they have extra time off, whereas M80 coming with a back-to-back best-of-3s, straight off a hot series win into another one, which is theoretically going to give you the advantage early on, but the Union had a bit more time to prep, to look at this series, and to think what they were going to do, but, you know, because it was relatively clear, certainly after map 1 of the series against TenZ, that they were going to play M80 in this series, so it was always tough to say who it favoured, but M80 just destroyed them. Game 1 was dominant, Game 2 was even more so, and Xander was making plays, and this series was quickly just over in a heartbeat, right? And we get Koala Noob here saying no franchising for you. We saw the other day some of the trash talk from the Guard actually to the Union, because the Union had talked trash on M80, and the Guard were like, you know, we shut them down to get revenge for our boys M80 that are also from the North American region. And then we get all the clapback here from M80 last night, basically waving goodbye to these guys in their, I mean, look, it's based in Brazil, right, this tournament, so this is very spicy indeed in front of the home crowds, and they're waving goodbye. So man, it was all popping off here last night. There's some EU as well, just laughing about it, and he says like, sorry you paid money to watch me 2-0 your favourite team, to this reply of, I don't know why people do this type of stuff, to be fair, but you shouldn't celebrate, you should be ashamed. So I mean, look at the reaction here from the M80 guys. 2-0 versus the Onion, he says. All that talk after winning a seeding match, and they play like that in front of their home crowds. Show some respect after the match next time, which I thought was just phenomenal. It's like, yeah, these guys just played terrible in front of their home crowd. You know, all of those fans wanted those guys to, you know, get through and knock out M80, but they just played terrible. So, you know, disrespecting your home crowd in some sense is what he's saying. And then John QT says, told little bro to keep the same energy after winning a seeding game, but he didn't. Bro could only compete in the same stage he played for 7 months. NA final, let's go. So, I mean, man, I mean, then even this from Nismo, those guys are terrible, he says. Wow, I mean, that was big time. And this was my favourite tweet by far. This came from Psycho's dad. I'm pretty sure this actually is Psycho's dad on Twitter. Now vice president of esports or something at M80. The Union's girlfriends put up more of a fight than they did. I mean, wow, that is, it's basically a reference to NTK having, you know, getting arrested for domestic abuse, effectively, is what we're talking about here. So, I mean, man, what a crazy result. And M80 really just put the dagger down, you know, like they just completely destroyed them in this series. Wasn't even close. 13-5 Lotus, 13-3 on Fracture, and that was done and dusted. So M80 playing how they usually played, to be honest, online in the Americas, how you'd expect them to, and the Union will not be making it through to Ascension and getting through. So Riot don't even have to think about that anymore, which I'm sure they're quite happy about, because if they did, they would have some questions to answer as to whether those players should be allowed to compete in the franchise league. But we will have, as expected, to be honest, right, for some time, the M80 versus the Guards matchup in the finals. We talked about it before the Americas Ascension, whether the Union would end up putting up a fight to this level, or whether, you know, it was going to be M80 versus the Guards. The question now for me is like, who's going to win out of those two teams? Because the Guards won in the first matchup they played, and it was relatively comfortable, but this is going to be a best of 5. The deeper map pool will be tested. So far in this tournament, the Guards have been the better team. M80 looked shaky in groups, but yesterday they really hit stride, right? I mean, beating TenZ the way they did, and then destroying the Union. Like, the Union played bad, obviously, but still, destroying them in that manner was very impressive. And in region, M80 have generally had the better of the Guards, but a lot of that has been online, and on LAN is a different story. When the pressure is really on, this is where I think I would expect the Guard to be slightly favoured here. They did win the first time, but quite often when a team wins the first time, the rematch often can go the other way, because that team is saying, alright, we won this map, like, we're going to be good to play them again on those maps, but actually that other team has been doing all the research over the last few days, because I'm sure the M80 guys were like, alright, if we're going to win this tournament, we've got to prep not just for TenZ and for the Union, but also for the Guards, because we know we're going to play them in the finals, and M80 have had a couple of days off to prep, so they've probably looked heavily back at the way they lost that series to the Guards, where they can improve, and if they play those maps again, as you'd think that the Guard will let through come the finals, then we might have a different story. So hopefully it's a more competitive series than we saw the first time. Would be good if it was a 5-mapper. We'll say from Willminder as well that possibly Riot will look at the format and say, well, M80, they won both the best of 3s. That proves it's a good format in some respect. Not really sure that it does, but you know, the fact that they did win both of them in a row and made it look easy might mean that Riot says, actually, yeah, great format. Let's keep it going for next year, despite the fact that really that series against the Union I think should have been a best of 5. Okay, it would have still been an absolute bloodbath, probably on a separate day. And these are then the top performers of the tournament so far. Just looking at the Guard and the M80 guys, I mean, we can see Trent here is by far the top performer, then Nismo, then Jonah P, and then, you know, it's pretty mixed up actually between the Guard and M80. Mostly there's more the Guard players, like there's 4 the Guard players in the top 6 here. And okay, a lot of the rating numbers are very close together and it's not exactly the be-all and end-all, but yeah, just goes to show what these teams have done and what they're expected to do, and it does set up this grand finals that I think we expected really all along. M80 in region would be the favourites, but in this set of circumstances, I think the Guard 3-2 is a safe and favourable prediction, but very much intrigued to hear your thoughts and perspective in the comment section below, and that is going to set up our first team to qualify for the next 2 years of franchising. Let's not forget, this is like one of the most important matchups of the entire season. This organisation and team will qualify for franchising, not just for 1 but for 2 seasons. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.